Hi guys, and welcome in this new episode. In this series we are following me towards building an MVP from scratch. The idea is that I launched before the end of the month and the progress looks good so far, so I want to show you what I did the last couple of days. So first of all, we changed the database structure for the lists, and let me show you what we had before. Before we had a model. We had a list data JSON field, and we would store all the event like this. This is how we stored it. So let me see. Yeah. So we would do columns, and then we would add an event type or each event like this, and then we would create a table out of this. And I don't know how I came up with this idea and how I was looking at it before, but at one point on my to-do list was that we needed some CRUD on the lists. And yeah, you cannot really, it's really difficult to work with this. So what I now did is I removed that field, the list data JSON field, and I created a separate column which represent the column in the top with a name, a data type, and a unique ID in a sort order. And then I also added a row, and each row represents just a row below each column, and then we have the value of the row. So each column has its own value, and this one has a foreign key to the row in the column, and then we have a text value, integer, etc. And if it's set here, then it shows this. So it's kind of restricted, which is what I want, because later the idea is that we also give the user the ability to create like charts and segments out of that list. But that idea is after the MVP. I will show you how this looks now. So the list now has a same, but what I also changed is that you can now, with the sort order, we can now say, okay, let's swap this one here, and it's real-time updated, so that's nice. And let's populate a list. We have a check, and the check checks if a website is still has attributes. So let's see if it can store something in the list for us. There we are. It adds this to the list. Then we go to the list that is, I think, this one. Yeah, so here we are. So now we see the row ID. So this row is now created in a database. So we have a row. This one. See, so this is now the row. And then we have all the columns, but that's a lot of the same stuff. And then we have the values. And these are the values for here. So for example, page URL. If I click on this one, you will see the page URL, and it's a text value. So that's kind of how I represent that list right now. We can remove the rows still with the same button. Yeah, of course you want to be able to update a name and a description, but also we have columns, so we can remove columns. So we could say, let's remove this message. But how to add a column back, because we are kind of restricted per type. We want a certain set of columns. So I kind of separated the edit for the name. So for example, this is now the name. I separated this logic, this update stuff from adding a column and here removing a column. So for example, we can now say add a column, and then we can just select the columns that are not already there. So in this case, we only have message, so that one we can select. And if we don't want it, we can just put it back. That's kind of how it works now. Might change in the future. I can even imagine people want to update these field names, but for now this is enough. And now we add the column back. Of course, the value is now empty. We might also want an option that people can, like Excel, can just real-time update the values, but that's also not for today. But this is kind of cool. And we have another option, flush alls, and this way we can just remove everything. That's it for lists. That was a big update for me. And also an insight, because you have this idea like, oh shit, this should be different. Then in your head it's like, oh, but we build an MVP and we should not do it. And then I thought like, yeah, but what if we have the first users? They store their data and you cannot just change that later. So this is kind of cost me a few hours, but at least it's super steady and scalable right now. So that's why that's an important one for me. So I showed you the update list stuff that was on my list, to-do list. Also what I did is a validation for models. So let's say we now have this list. This list is now in a trigger. So I think it's to checks. I don't know what that does, but this one. So yeah, to explain the application one more time, it's the UI is a bit unclear, but yeah, it does the job. And let's see. Yeah, so we have does element exist? If not, it's added to a list. That's the check we just did. So, and this check is, I believe this one. You say does element exist? So if this doesn't check out, it adds to the list. So what we now have is that I cannot delete this list. That was in the beginning, we didn't have that yet. It checks it's in use by an event. And also if you want to remove, for example, this event, should say the same, it's in use by a trigger and so on. So the trigger as well, we cannot remove that one. Let's see, just to show you, it's in use by a check. So everything is checked, and that's very important as well. Otherwise you create a mess without 404 views, etc. So yeah, another big thing I worked on is big as in the logic is quite complex in my head, but when you work on it, it's kind of worked out. I showed you in the last video, excuse me, I showed you in the last video that every trigger has a purpose, like this field is like a character field, and we add a check, comma tracker, with the idea that maybe in the past we have different ways of doing it. So maybe we have extra values coming. So that was kind of my idea, to put it on a character field, and we call it purposes. So the trigger has a purpose. And what we then have is, if we create a trigger, this is, I don't know if this is the best way of coding, but it works. So we evaluate the purpose of a trigger. So just on every time we create a trigger, for example, let me show you that first. So here, for example, we have a trigger. It's now a tracking purpose. So if I add a new event, and I just do a void event which does nothing, and that's a multi-purpose event. So let's say, it updates this. Yeah, so now the value was tracking because of some old stuff, but you see what it does. It kind of real-time updates the purpose of the event. So now it's multi-purpose, because a void event can be used by triggers and by checks. By tracking click events and by checks. And some of the events are only able to be used by tracking. For example, callback element, the HTML element callback, you cannot use by checks. Checks, you can send emails and add to a list, but that's it. And have a void event, do nothing. But for example, if I now add a callback event, it makes it tracking. It says, you can only use it here. And if I now am in checks, and I have a check, and I want to, and I trigger to list, so I want to change this, it's not there. I cannot add this trigger to list trigger to this checks, but I can add it to the click events. Oh yeah, so this is funny. I want this check to fail for test purpose, so I added an HTML and then some crap data, so it always checks. It always gives an error back, so it adds to the list. So this is for me an important one, and then you also see it here, tracking, checks, or multi-purpose. And the same goes for events. It also shows you the purpose. And at one point, I guess that we want to have a search bar here, and also be able to maybe have like a per purpose, like a filter function or some organizational stuff. But that's not important for me for the MVP. That I wanted to show you. And also what I did is create a Stripe account, which is simple. You just open an extra account. I already had one. And what I did is add a model to the database. Let's see. Subscription products is the way I did it. Do it for Stockpilot. Billing cycle. It could be yearly and monthly. Stripe plan ID and then the Stripe price. I used DJ Stripe in the past. I think of not using it at all this time. It's a bit of overkill for me. It's super cool, but it's just not what I need always. So I just add these models. There are like 4 models I'm thinking of, like a free tier as well. That's something I'm considering. So if you have some opinions about that, let me know. But I think about a free tier. And then upgrade now has now, this one is now represented, of course. If we add a second one, we could say hacker 99, but that would be the free one, I guess. Monthly. And that's something I really have to work on. And there is a topic, that's the one that will be highlighted in HTML, but then you see them both there. And they are, I think, on sort ID. So if we make this one 0 and the other one 1, I don't know if that's already working, but yeah, so that's already, and that way I can just manage it from the back end. And another thing that I think is very cool is this. I had a guy on Fiverr that helped me with a little graphic. So pay a few, like was it 50 euro or so? And it's still super abstract, but it looks kind of cool. And then I had a feedback from my wife that this is too technical and not really selling a value. So the text, this copy I really have to work on. But this could already be on Product Hunt or in the Reddit stuff that at least you feel a product. And then we need some extra stuff below here for the features. And I made these really crappy images. Yeah, maybe I try to rebuild this myself out of this style, or I hire the same guy. Let's see. But I don't want to make too many costs before it validates itself. But I think it's important to have like a little vibe around the branding. So yeah, that's it. That's the update from me today. I will work the next coming days on the creation of referral labels. That's an important one. That is this. Add a label. That's a totally different topic, but this is something to, if you track domains, you could say Bing paid based on, for example, the condition is it contains, so the URL of the referrer contains a certain value, bing.com or something, and you could say like Bing organic, because if it contains this and not, for example, and not contains a certain what is it, like a certain PPC parameter, then you know it's organic. But for example, if it consists of that parameter, you know it's a Bing paid. So these kind of labels users can make themselves, but this is not working yet. So that's kind of one thing I have to do. And then when that's done, let's see, we have this these two sessions here, and this session has a google.com and a parameter, and then this session has something else. And they are both now direct, which is not correct. It should be like a Google paid, because that label exists, but I don't know why that doesn't show. So that's something I really have to work on, this view. And I also added this little visits per label. So, and if I click now on this one, it just duplicates it, which is not good. And let's see, it's just very buggy, this view. I can not even select two. I don't even know why. But yeah, that's something I really have to work on. I chose to use data tables here, but it's cool. But I think the view is just super messy. So because of the server side stuff, so I might go back to normal tables, because I don't think people really use this much next to just searching. So I don't know why you would. Yeah, you can use this, but you can also just select date ranges here. But yeah, those two things I really have to work on. And then there's some JavaScript logic I have to work on regarding click events. And that's kind of, I think the click events are the big thing within this MVP. And we have this idea of if I have, for example, click event like parameter param is, and then we can say keep, for example, a value, and then it kind of cross-domain keeps this value, so it adds it back to the next, to the redirect of the domain. Another cool thing is that you can set, then it sets it to a cookie, or you say store, then it stores it in a local storage. And this value can be a variable, so we have session ID, but and then it becomes the session ID of the user, like this hash, and that you can grab back. So you can do crazy stuff with this. And I also think that, so this is something I really want to solidify, like that it really works very well. There's some buggy stuff around this. Oh, and now it crashed. And also what I want to do is add a field here that you can also say keep, set, or store here within the action. So instead of typing it in your URL, you can also just choose it from here, like actions. So those things I want to work on. And for this week, that's for this week, and for this week also the billing engine, that everything works on monthly, yearly, but that's for me a lot of copy pasting from my other project. And also this week I want to finish all the API endpoints, the most important ones. And then from next week onward, I really want to focus on more marketing stuff. So the landing pages, getting into forums, see who my audience is, what customers I solve a pain point for, kind of get that all going. So hopefully I am even done. Maybe next week we can already launch, who knows, but yeah. That's it for me, a lot of talking again. I hope you enjoy these videos, and if you have anything to add or any feedback, let me know. And see you in the next one. Bye bye.